I was trying to talk to you and I was still muted, so I've been having some technical difficulties this morning. Good morning. My name is Jan Adrian and I'm the founder and director of Healing Journeys. And for 25 years, Healing Journeys has offered the free conference, Cancer as a Turning Point from Surviving to Thriving. And many of the presentations from those events are on our YouTube page. I would like to give you a warm welcome for today. And I say good morning because I'm in Sacramento where it is morning now. But when Kelly Turner comes on, she will be in New York in the afternoon. And some of you are watching from other countries. In England, it's 6 o'clock right now. And some of you will be watching much later. So a warm welcome to all of you. There are people registered from 11 different countries. I'm going to tell you what they are. Australia, Canada, France, Ireland, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, South Africa, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and the United States. So welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us for the fourth in our Zoom speaker series for 2022. And my gratitude goes out to all of you who made donations when you registered. We really appreciate your support. Our subject for today is the 10 key healing factors as described by Kellyanne Turner. I first met Kellyanne Turner more than 10 years ago when she was doing her research when she was doing her research for her PhD thesis at UC Berkeley. And I met her because because one of her subjects was Nancy McKay, who is a good friend of mine. And Kelly traveled the world for a year doing research with people that had had spontaneous remissions from cancer. And Kelly quit using the term spontaneous remission because she said there was nothing spontaneous about these remissions. People had worked very hard to make them happen. And she identified the strategies that they all had in common, and she coined the word radical remission. When Kelly was a speaker at a Healing Journeys conference in 2012, those factors that she identified became my treatment plan for my cancer. Since then, Kellyanne Turner is the New York Times best-selling author of 2 books, Radical Remission and Radical Hope, now in 22 languages, which summarizes her research into radical remissions. And she defines radical remissions as when someone heals from cancer or other serious illness in a statistically unlikely way, such as without conventional medicine or after conventional medicine has failed. Over the past 15 years, she has conducted research in 10 different countries and analyzed over 1,500 cases of radical remission. She holds a BA from Harvard University and her PhD from the University of California in Berkeley. Kelly has created and directed a docuseries that explores each of the 10 healing factors from her research and features many of the radical remission survivors from the books. If you've read the books, you know that's full of stories of radical remission survivors. She's also the founder of the Radical Remission Project website, which continues to collect new cases of radical remissions, and offers online courses, in-person workshops, and one-on-one health coaching. In today's program, Kelly will talk about the Radical Remission docuseries, how she aimed to share the 10 key healing factors common among radical remission survivors through visual and emotional storytelling. She'll cover the 10 factors and her research along with some case studies from the docuseries. We will have plenty of time for Q&A after her presentation. And if and when you have questions, I would like you to use the Q&A function, which on my computer, it's on the bottom of the screen, depending on what kind of device you have. I don't know where it is on yours, but I will be reading the questions and asking her afterwards. I can't keep up with both the chat and the Q&A. So please use the Q&A when you have questions, and we'll get to them when she finishes her presentation. So Kelly, I am now turning it over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see all your faces the way that Zoom does this. I can just see Jan. But I can see that there are quite a few participants here, and it's really wonderful to hear all the countries that you're watching in from. So thanks for tuning in on this Saturday. And Jan, thanks for inviting me back to Healing Journeys. I can't believe that was 2012. That was before my book came out. Yeah, because you found me because of my dissertation. So thank you to Jan for inviting me to share my research even before the book came out. That was very generous of you. So anyway, today I wanted to tell you about not only my research, but the newest form of my research, which is the docuseries. So I like to tell stories in lots of different ways. I write scientific articles. I write books that cancer patients can read from the chemo chair. But actually, my favorite way to learn is visually. So I've always loved films. And as soon as I met these incredible radical remission survivors, and I traveled around the world meeting them in their homes, in their living rooms, I thought, I want to bring these people to everyone. So that's what we've done with the docuseries. So before I get into, my research in PowerPoint, I thought I would just share with you the trailer for this series so that you can see what it's like. And I will do that right here. Let's see, share screen. Okay, so hopefully you can hear this. Jan, let me know if you don't hear this. So here's the trailer, and this series is coming out October 3rd, so just in a few weeks.
He said, you need to sit down, and I think you know why. He said that the biopsy came back positive for cancer.
They both had tears in their eyes, and they said, "We'll never forget the lump that you felt in your son's back, which is the tip of the iceberg."
It was just a mega bolt that really plunged me into huge depression.
When you start getting the definitive time, like they telling you got 24 months. At some point, you just say, man, listen, let me just embrace every day.
I said, I'm going to do anything I can and whatever I can to survive this.
We can't just outsource our health. After my 15 years of research, what I learned is radical remission survivors, they changed every aspect of their lives.
Those people who reach inside and really take control, measure that. I'm a scientist. You can't measure the human spirit.
The idea is to become the most inhospitable host to cancer possible.
People always ask me, isn't this diet hard? My first reaction is, well, dying is way harder.
I have a whole list of pills. I have to order them every day. Get around on top here on the screen to the pill.
When you start focusing on all of these positives, I am loved, I am healthy, affirmations are huge.
The more diseases we study and the more biological mechanisms we look at, the more scientific evidence we have of how powerful these simple changes are and how quickly people can improve.
They gave me 3 to 6 months to live. I'm still here. 10 years later, feeling good.
Our son Ryder is a radical remission survivor of stage 4 neuroblastoma,
Of multiple sclerosis.
Stage 4 melanoma.
Of ALS.
If I can make it, you can make it. So don't ever lose hope. As long as you're breathing, there's hope.
Okay, so that's what's coming October 3rd, and I really can't wait to share it with all of you. And when I see that trailer, I think, oh, there's Shin, there's Palmer, there's Charles, there's Bob. I know these people, and they are just dear to my heart and soul. And I'm so excited for you to get to meet them. If any of you listening have read my books, the last man that you saw in the trailer there is Shin Tariyama. the Japanese man from chapter 2 of Radical Remission. He's the one who went up to watch the sunrise every morning. So we were very lucky that he was visiting the United States right when we were filming. So we were able to film him here in the US, and that's wonderful. So I'm so excited for you guys to see it. And I would love for your questions. Feel free to, Jan, if you're okay with this, I might just say, as I'm going along, if people have questions, they're welcome to type them in. And Jan, feel free to interrupt me, because I want this to feel more like a conversation. Sound good? Okay, so I'm just going to walk you a little bit through my research. Many of you might be familiar with it, but in case you're not, I wanted to just sort of give you a background, and then I'll talk to you about how the docuseries fits into all of that. So as Jan walked you through, I call these sort of remissions from cancer radical remissions, not spontaneous remissions. And that's because people work very, very hard at these remissions. So specifically, it's a statistically unlikely cancer remission, right? These are people who are beating the odds, who are healing when their doctors don't expect them to. So there's 3 different categories. First, someone who heals without any conventional medicine. So they're officially diagnosed. It's not a misdiagnosis, but they choose not to use conventional medicine. Maybe they choose to postpone it for a while. Maybe they want to try lifestyle changes first. And for them, that works. The second category is people who are forced to switch to alternative methods after conventional medicine has failed. So these are people like Shin Tariyama who are sent home on hospice care, and then they turn it around. And the third category are people who are turning around really fatal, really dire prognoses, right? So pancreatic cancer, stage 4 lung cancer, glioblastoma. These are diagnoses that are typically fatal within 5 years. So really anyone who's beating those cancers, I want to talk to, even if they combine conventional and alternative medicine at the same time, which of course, as a researcher, makes it hard to discern, well, which one is helping? Is it one or the other, or is it both? When it comes to beating pancreatic cancer, me and many other researchers simply don't care. If you're beating it, that is the anomaly. And so that's that third group. Jan already walked you through my research. It's been 15 years now, and we're, over 1,500 cases in 10 countries. So what I can say is that radical remissions are rare, but they happen much more often than doctors think. They happen across every single cancer type, all countries, genders, religions, you name it. So they are happening more often than we think. And of course, my philosophy is, even though we can't explain exactly how and why these people are getting well, if we don't study them at all, we will never find any answers. If we do study them, we can build hypotheses and then test those hypotheses in clinical settings. So that's the aim of my research. What did I find? I found that radical remission survivors are doing 10 things in common. Many of them do much more than 10 things. But when I look across, well, what are they all doing? They're all doing these 10 things. So it's important to remember these become hypotheses of why they got well, right? Just because they have these things in common doesn't mean that these things will, 1, work for everyone, or 2, that all 10 are necessary. Maybe only 3 of them are necessary, and the other 7, they're doing them, but they don't actually make a difference, right? So as a researcher, it's important for me to be careful about the conclusions we draw from the observations we're making from the data. So these 10 common factors become 10 hypotheses for why these people got well. And again, just really emphasizing the point that underreporting is very real. So to put that into perspective, only 4 of the more than 500 new cases that have been collected from my website, radicalremission.com, since 2005, only 4 of them have been published in medical journals as case reports. And that doesn't mean that the other, 496 were misdiagnoses or weren't radical remissions. Me and my team of researchers check these people's medical records. So what it means is that the only way to publish a case report in a peer-reviewed medical journal is for a doctor. This is, again, the doctor who doesn't know why you healed, to take about 40 hours of their time on nights and weekends to write up your report and send it into a publisher. And then you need that journal to be willing to publish a case for which the doctor has no hypothesis. So there's a lot of things that need to happen to get case reports in peer-reviewed journals. And that's why these cases aren't reported. Okay, let's dive in. The 10 healing factors. I'm going to go through them a little quickly today because I'm honestly much more interested in your questions. And Jan, just unmute. Yeah.
I just did. So that there are some questions already that I think might help people settle into what you're saying.
Perfect.
One is, where will we be able to watch the docuseries? You said October 3rd, but where?
Yes, at hayhouse.com. So Hay House is the publisher of my second book, Radical Hope. And they also were the ones who very generously funded the filming of the docuseries. So they are the ones who get to show the docuseries.
Okay. And then Radical Remission says 9 healing factors. So now you're saying 10. So
10.
For people that haven't read Radical Hope, that's a question.
Yeah. So here's Radical Hope. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. And we were deciding about whether to call it Radical Hope or the 10th factor. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in exercise, but I'll just give you a preview. Basically, exercise was a very common factor in my initial round of research, but it wasn't coming up in every single interview like the other 9. And so actually, much to my dismay, I couldn't put it in my final findings because it wasn't in every single interview. And then when Radical Remission came out and I put up the website to collect more cases, every case that came in after that included exercise or movement. And it was enough of a discrepancy there between the first data set and the second data set that I said, let me go back and follow up with these people. So I followed up with a bunch of people from the first data set. And I said, you didn't mention exercise in our 3-hour interview. And they're like, yep, that's right. I could not go back to running my half marathons for at least 2 years. And I actually remember one person who said that, like a half marathon, talking to someone who's never run a marathon. And I was like, half marathon, whoa. I'm not talking about a half marathon. I'm talking about, any sort of movement. And they're like, yeah, I couldn't exercise back then. I couldn't exercise. The most I could do is like walk around the block or maybe 2 blocks. And that's when I realized, oh, we're defining things differently. They hear the word exercise and they think it needs to be a 60-minute aerobics class. But when you have stage 4 cancer and you're sent home on hospice care, walking to the kitchen and back to your bedroom is considered exercise, given the state of your body. And so when I paused and I said, well, wait a second, did you walk around the block regularly? And they said, yeah, every day. And I walked as much as I could. So some days it was 1 block, some days it was 6 blocks. And then I realized, okay, this is what's happening here, is that it's a semantics issue. What I'm asking them about, which is exercise, they're only defining as like a 60-minute class in the gym or weightlifting or half marathons. When we redefine it and redescribe it as daily movement, all of the first data set cases is yes. So that's why we revised the research and Radical Hope came out with 10 factors, the 10th one being exercise. So any more questions at the moment, Jan? Okay, great. Oh, and by the way, for that question about where can I watch the docuseries, hang in there because I have a little surprise for you at the end. I have a special link to give you where you can watch the first episode right now. All right. So there are 10 factors. I like to break them up into 3 categories because otherwise it gets very overwhelming. So the 3 foundational categories, the first one is strong reasons for living. This is, whatever your reasons are. So instead of focusing on dying, you're focusing on why do you want to live, right? And that's why I say here in the bullet point here that it's different than fighting death, because when we're fighting death or we're scared of death, we are in cortisol, right? We are in fight or flight. We are in the stress response. And radical remission survivors, many of them don't even talk about fighting cancer or being in a battle. They just put all of their energy and focus on why they want to live. And they focus on traveling or writing that novel or spending time with their children or their grandchildren. And that actually puts you it reduces your stress because you're doing something you love. You're with people you love. You're doing something that brings you joy. And so it takes you out of fight or flight and into rest and repair. So that's probably why we shouldn't be surprised that this is a health-inducing lifestyle change to make, to focus on this. I'm not going to go through all the bullet points here because I want to make sure we get to questions, but you'll be able to go back to this recording and follow up on some of these research studies that I'm listing. The second foundational healing factor is empowerment. And that is finding a way to feel empowered during your healing journey. So it's a shift away from being the passive, quiet patient who just nods and says yes, to being a more active patient and a more active wellness seeker who is on a healing journey and isn't just being dragged along by their doctors, but is actually leading the healing journey. And the doctors become team members who are sort of, on the journey with them. But radical remission survivors really tend to be the leaders of their journey. And what does that look like? It looks like doing your research, getting familiar with pubmed.gov, which is where all the medical studies are listed. Maybe questioning some of the things that your doctors tell you, asking them to, give more reasons why or explain more details. And then especially being empowered in the decision-making process so that you feel like you can say no, or you can say, I need a weekend to think about that. Again, these are not things that I'm telling you to do. I'm just a researcher who tells you what radical remission survivors do. So very important for you to know, I'm not against Western medicine, and I'm not here to tell anyone how they can cure their cancer. I am just a PhD researcher telling you, this is what this unique group of people, this is what they do, and this is how they behave. So interesting study here for empowerment is that in one study, helpless cancer patients had a 60% greater chance of dying. So, and they were self-reporting how helpless they were. So really, if you're feeling helpless and you feel like there's nothing you can do to change the outcome, you can have up to a 60% greater chance of actually dying. And I think that's an important statistic for people to hear, as kind of depressing as it is. It's important to understand the healing power of becoming empowered. All right, we're going to talk about one more, and then we're going to watch another video from the docuseries. So the third foundational factor is social support. This means receiving love and support from your loved ones, whoever they may be. It could be your pets, it could be your friends, it could be your family. This is one of the most powerful healing factors. And that's not me just saying that because I believe it's powerful to love people. We have so many studies that show that loneliness kills, and that social support is actually more protective for your health than diet and exercise combined. So, you could be eating the perfect, macrobiotic kale, omega-3 salad, and you could be doing your perfect, high intensity interval training exercise. But if you feel alone and you're just have this aching feeling of loneliness all day, that will affect your biochemistry in a negative way. Whereas if you are finding ways to reach out to community or connect with pets or friends or family, being with people and feeling loved and supported by them releases a very powerful chemical called oxytocin, which is known as like the cuddle hormone. You don't have to actually cuddle. You just need to, you could read a birthday card from someone and you have a release of oxytocin. But just to let you know how powerful this hormone is, it has been shown to reduce the number of cancer cells in petri dishes of breast and ovarian cancers, right? So you drip in some oxytocin and they go away. So it's really important to understand that this isn't just sort of feel good. Oh, it's nice to be loved by friends and family. Like, no, it's actually changing your cells. So I always like to bring the science into that. So just to give you a little taste of the docuseries and how it will teach you about one of these three foundational factors, I wanted to share with you a little preview from our first episode, which again, I'll give you the link at the end to watch. And this is with Shin Tariyama and Palmer Kippola. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and then I'm going to share this screen. Okay. This is when I wish I had one of those very big, like 3 screens. I just have one little computer.
One morning, I woke up to go to work and the soles of my feet were all tingling. Only this particular morning, the blood didn't rush back. sat in the neurologist's office. Within literally 5 minutes, she said, I'm 99% certain that you have multiple sclerosis. And if I'm right, there's nothing you can do.
I feel very strange to as I'm in the coffin. When the middle of the coffin, just to be cool, I return to my body. I'm shouting, I'm still alive. It's completely free. But something changed.
We can't just outsource our health to doctors. It's both scary and empowering because it's up to us. My name is Palmer Kippola, and I am a radical remission survivor of multiple sclerosis.
And I'm a survivor of multiple myeloma cancer.
All right, so perfect. So if you watch episode 1, you'll get to meet Shin Tariyama, who healed from stage 4 kidney cancer. He was sent home on the Japanese equivalent of hospice care. His doctor said, there's nothing more we can do for you. He had surgery, he had chemo, he had radiation. It had spread to his lungs. So he was given maybe 3 months to live, and he went home and just started doing these small little changes to try to have another day with his wife and kids. He actually believed he was going to die in 3 months. So by being sent home on hospice care, it actually forced him to accept his death and accept his mortality, and that it was imminent any day. It also allowed him to move into a space of deep gratitude for every new day that he was alive. And he talks both in Radical Remission, the book, and in the docuseries about how he went up to watch the sunrise every morning, simply to express deep gratitude for being alive another day. He had another day with his wife and children, and he was so grateful for that. He also changed his diet. He actually went on like a 14-day water fast in the beginning. And that was just, no one told him to do that. That was just intuitive. He didn't feel like eating, and he wanted his water to be very clean. And he just made all of these sort of intuitive changes. He was just sort of going by feel because his doctors had given up on him. And little by little, he felt better and better and better. And he's, it's 30 plus years later, and he's an 85-year-old grandfather. So very happy ending with Shin. And you'll have to, yes, Jan.
So I don't know if you want to do questions when they come up, but this one really relates to the social support that you just talked about.
Perfect.
So she says, one of the hardest things for me, stage 4 breast cancer, on this path of surviving living has been that sharing the journey with others leads to them or their loved ones' cancer story with death and helplessness. It's hard to access social support when being bombarded by all these stories.
Thank you so much for that question. That is such a spot on question. And what I will share with you, again, I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't give medical advice, but I can share with you what radical remission survivors do. Many of them are very careful about who they tell about their diagnosis. I'm not telling you you should keep it a secret or you shouldn't. That's absolutely up to you. But some people that I've studied are very sensitive to other people's fear or instant pity or really instant fear. If you tell someone you have a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis, many people get very scared for you. They also get very scared for themselves. Either way, they're scared. So now you're sitting across from someone who's sitting in fear, and you feel that, you sense that. And because of that instant, response, and it's very unconscious for people, they can't really help it. Many of the radical remission survivors that I study do pick and choose who they tell about what's really going on. And some of them keep that circle very, very small. Maybe it's their therapist and their life partner. Maybe they tell their children if they have any, just some vaguer details. And then they pick and choose which friends to share it with. That is a personal decision that's up to you. I just wanted to offer that as one option. If sharing what you're going through leads to bringing you down into despair, where you're hearing all these horrible stories of non-success, that's not going to help you stay in a place of rest and repair. It's going to move you into fight or flight. So I would say, feel free to give yourself permission to be very picky and choosy about who you talk to about your situation. And some people really keep it a secret and they just go on with their reasons for living. And they say, oh, I've got to go. I've got an appointment, and that might work for some people. So that's how I would answer that, Jan.
Thank you. That's great. And a couple other things. Somebody raised their hand, and I just want to remind us that because of the setup of this webinar, we can't bring other people on, but if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A and then I will ask it. And here's one other I think we could deal with now.
Yeah.
Did you address cases of substantial improvement where full remission did not occur? Books I have read tend to say improved quality and quantity of life. So I'm an example of that. I have not had remission for 33 years, but I have had improved quality of life.
Right. Well, let me actually correct you on that, Jan. You are in remission. You just don't have no evidence of disease. So from a medical standpoint, remission just means that the disease is stable and not causing problems. That is the technical definition of remission. So, for example, Joe from my Radical Remission book, a man with stage 3 lung cancer, and he's also featured in the docuseries, a lovely man. I'm so grateful that he shared his story with me, not just in an interview, but also let us film him because it's a beautiful story. He still has lung cancer tumors. They're there. They're small. He's like, yeah, they're there. They're just there. They're smaller. They're not growing. They're not changing. They're just there. And he's not worried about it. His doctors are like, well, they're not causing you any problems and just keep on going. And he's been in remission for more than 10 years now. So it is technically, you are considered in remission if your disease is stable, shrinking, and not causing stable or shrinking and not causing problems. That is the definition of remission. And the gold standard that everyone's hoping for is no evidence of disease, but that is absolutely not required. That is just a little icing on the cake that some people achieve, but many radical remission survivors don't. Many radical remission survivors will still have evidence of disease, but it's not growing, it's not changing. And if they didn't get scanned, they wouldn't know they had it. So, all right, well, let me jump back for a minute into the factors just so that we can make sure we cover everything. Let me just share my screen here. And we'll go back to this. All right, so we watched that. So we talked about the 3 foundational factors, social support, empowerment, and strong reasons for living. The reason I call those foundational is because if you have those sort of in place, it makes doing the physical and emotional work a lot easier, right? If you have your friends and family supporting you, if you know why you're doing this, if you're feeling empowered about this journey, then when someone asks you to start eating differently or moving your body differently, you're going to be much more excited about making those changes. So we'll talk about the physical ones briefly. The first one is making a radical diet change. There are not tons of similarities among radical remission survivors. It took me, I had to really zoom out from the data to be able to say what they were all doing. They were certainly all changing their diet, but some were paleo and some were keto and some were vegan and some were raw and some were fruit only and some were no fruit. It was, honestly, it made my head spin. But if you back up from the data enough, you can see some commonalities. And what they're doing is they're reducing, or in some cases eliminating, meat, wheat, sweets, and dairy. So meat, gluten, refined sugars, and dairy. And what are they replacing those with? Vegetables and or fruits. Certainly vegetables, that's common across the board. Nobody's not eating vegetables. Many people are eating fruits, and some people stay away from the fruits if they're trying to do more ketogenic. But that's about as specific as I can get when it comes to describing radical remission survivors. What I will say is that different diets seem to work for different people and different cancer types. So it's not, I wouldn't encourage anyone to get too judgy about diets. If some diet has worked for you, great. Just know that it may not work for someone, even if they have the exact same cancer as you. They don't have the same body metabolism as you. They might be insulin resistant. They might be dealing with obesity. They might be dealing with genetic conditions that affect the way they metabolize food. So really, you just got to find the diet that works specifically for you and for your metabolism. A little research here, the AICR had a great big study came out a few years ago saying that 30 to 40% of all cancers, I mean, that is a huge statement to make. 30 to 40% of all cancers can be prevented by appropriate diet, physical activity, and healthy body weight. And for the medical establishment to come out and say that so loudly was wonderful music to my ears. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that study. And the sources are all here in the slides too. So you can, when it says PMID in the sources, that stands for PubMed. So if you go to pubmed.gov, type in that little number and the study will come right up. So I'll just buzz through these so that we can watch another video. Herbs and supplements. Again, this is very, very individualized. And this is really, of the 10 factors, this is the one you cannot do by yourself. Radical remission survivors don't do it by themselves. I don't recommend that anyone does herbs or supplements by themselves because this is medicine and you can dose or have a contraindication. This is plant medicine and it can be very strong and very powerful, but you need to make sure you're taking the right dose and the right supplements for you. The herbs and supplements that radical remission survivors are taking, they take them for 3 reasons. One, to detoxify their body. So that's getting something out of your body. Maybe you have Lyme disease or mold or parasites, right? The second reason is to boost something that's lacking. Maybe you're really low in vitamin D or you're really low in vitamin B. And so you'll take supplements to bring those things up. And then the third and a very important function is to aid in digestion. So these are things like pancreatic enzymes, digestive enzymes. I think we'll stop there because we could give a whole lecture on herbs and supplements. Yes, Jan.
We have one question related to that you could answer now, maybe.
Yeah.
How, and related to diet, how does alcohol and coffee factor into the diets?
Great question. Most integrative healers and doctors that I've studied would call those supplements and to treat them as such. Right. So coffee is an herb. Coffee is, a plant, you're getting the oils off of a bean. And it's a very potent plant medicine. So coffee should be treated as a supplement, as plant medicine. And just like any other supplement, it might be right for you or it might not. And alcohol, the same thing, alcohol is from plants. It's whether it's from grapes or potatoes or wherever you're getting it from, you're putting a plant through a very specific process. And, different integrative medicine practitioners will tell you if that particular plant-derived product is right for your body at this time. There are plenty of studies that you can find to justify or not justify alcohol and coffee. So you can find the studies that say red wine is good for resveratrol. You can find the other studies that say red wine is bad for breast cancer. You can find the studies that say coffee is great for your brain. And you can find other studies that say coffee is really bad for your heart in terms of making it race. So what I would say is find a really good supplement and herbs and supplement practitioner that you trust and ask them. So for example, I'll just give a personal example here. I went to see a Chinese medicine practitioner and he said, for you, given me at that point in time, he's like, I would recommend a glass of red wine at night. And then he said, for you, I would never do coffee. Like my system needed to calm down and my heart needed to go slower and different things in my meridians needed to change. So he was like, for you, red wine, yes, once a day. For you, coffee once a day, definitely not. And that surprised me because he felt that, or he decided that by, looking at my tongue and feeling my pulse and looking at my nails. And so that's just an example to say, I think you should really talk to a specific herbal/supplement doctor to see if alcohol or coffee are right to you. That being said, across the board, radical remission survivors do bring these things down to once a day. Just going to throw that out there. Nobody's drinking a bottle of wine a day and nobody's really drinking 5 cups of coffee a day. But some of them do end up eliminating one or the other. So.
Can I give you another example related to coffee? Because this one really surprised me.
Yeah.
When I had radiation, when I had ocular melanoma and I had radiation and I was working with Dr. Jean Wallace, as my nutritionist, and she said that I should drink a cup of coffee after every radiation treatment, even though I'm not normally a coffee drinker, because she said after radiation, the body would try to put itself together again, and the coffee would keep it from doing that, so it would make the radiation more effective.
Wow. I've
So
never
I
heard
did
that.
that. Even though I'm not a coffee drinker, for that period of radiation, I drank a cup of coffee after every radiation treatment.
Wow. Yeah. See, so the, the doctors and health practitioners who really know their supplements will have an opinion for you about where you are at your particular place in your health journey about coffee or alcohol. So that's what I would say about that. Okay. Movement is another one. Obviously, we talked about this earlier, how this was not in the first book, but then it was in the second book because of the way we're talking about it. And I'm actually trying to stay away from the word exercise and just use the word movement for that reason. But the commonality here is just daily movement, whatever you can do. If that's walking to the kitchen and back, that's enough. That's where you're at that day. That's what you do. If you blocks, walk 2 blocks. If you can walk 6 blocks, 6 blocks is better than 2 blocks. And the goal here is, half an hour a day of movement, 7 days a week, right? This research study that I mentioned here on the slide, 3 to 5 hours of walking a week, which ends up being about 30 minutes a day, was associated with significantly lower mortality among breast cancer patients, right? So these are people who are diagnosed with breast cancer and they're trying to survive as long as they can. Exercise really moved the needle and really made a difference. So, and then the last physical factor is intuition. And this is a tricky one. Everyone's like, why do you put this under physical? And I could put it under mental emotional, is mental emotional, but I put it here because I want to really hammer home the notion that intuition sits in the back of your brain. So a lot of people, when they hear the word intuition, they think, oh, it's woo woo, it's loosey goosey, it's not scientific. And I was guilty of that too. I thought that too. I was really uncomfortable when interview after interview after interview, these seemingly very normal people would say, I started hearing a voice. And I'm like, I can't believe I have to write this down because it felt not scientific for people to say they were hearing a voice or they had a hunch or they had a really bad feeling. And before I went and handed in, my draft dissertation to my professors at UC Berkeley, I was nervous about how they would respond to it. So I actually did a deep dive into the research and it made me feel so much better because the research shows us that we have the back part of our brain, the oldest part of our brain back here in the cerebellum, also known as the reptilian brain, is in charge of survival, like bodily survival. And it takes over when it feels that your body is threatened, when it feels like you have a death threat. So when we hear those words, you have cancer, in our society, that's considered a death threat. It's considered a threat to our life. And so it makes sense that this back part of your brain takes over. And it makes sense that the 100 million neurons in your gut will start crunching and talking to you and being fearful about the survival of your body. But it's not just fear that's talking to you. This part of your brain, when it takes over, it shuts down the front of your brain. The front of your brain, the frontal cortex, is where we make to-do lists. It's where we think, logically, step by step. Well, that's not how the back of the brain works. The back of the brain works very instantly and quickly. And it just gives us information and it doesn't tell us how we got there. So when you hear about, just ran across the street and grabbed her child without even thinking, get hit by, you interview her afterwards and she says, I didn't even think, I just acted. That's because the reptilian part of her brain took over. And that's what we're seeing when you hear these voices, when you have these strong gut feelings, when you feel the urge to take an action that just doesn't really make rational sense, right? Like, oh, I'm going to postpone the surgery for 2 weeks while I don't know, something's telling me to do that. And then the next day they wake up and they have an urge to call their friend from college. So they do. And then they call their friend from college who says, oh, I just met the most amazing integrative practitioner. You should meet with them. I'm not saying I'm saying this is what radical remission survivors do. And it's not that crazy when you think about the fact that this part of your brain is taking over. So that's where I'll leave it at that. We could talk forever about intuition. But I did want to show you another video from the docuseries. So of the physical factors, diet, herbs and supplement, movement, and intuition. One of the 10 episodes of the docuseries is on diet. And I wanted to share with you this video of our two diet women. So we did, where are we now? Diet. I chose was somebody who was doing ketogenic and someone who was doing the Gerson therapy, which is very, very vegetarian, maybe even vegan. So here are Allison and Bailey, and this is who you'll meet in the docuseries for the diet episode.
I thought I was doing great, exercising so much and winning all these competitions, energy bars and energy goos and energy drinks, and all of these took an immense toll on my health.
I had basically eaten whatever I wanted before cancer. I was not very happy about the diet change, but I was fighting for my life, so I grin and bear it.
Is it really possible to change your nutrition and change your lifestyle and have such radical things happen to your body? And the answer is yes, it is.
He said it appears that you have no sign of active disease and you no longer need my services. And then you have no cancer. My name is Bailey O'Brien, and I'm a radical remission survivor of stage 4 melanoma, of terminal malignant brain cancer.
Pancreatic cancer. And I'm a survivor of multiple myeloma cancer.
All right, so that is our diet episode, and Bailey again survived stage 4 melanoma, and a big part of that was the Gerson therapy diet, which is very vegetable based, a lot of juicing, and also daily coffee enemas. And Allison, who you saw there, she's the survivor of a terminal brain tumor, and I think it was astrocytoma. And she was given 6.5 months to live, and she's here 8+ years later. So those are those two wonderful women who've really worked on completely overhauling their diets, as well as the other 9 factors. So Jan, do we have any questions at the moment, or should I take us through the final 3 factors? Oh, I just can't hear you. I think you're muted.
I was muted. So we do have some questions. Let me get back to this one I wanted to ask.
Sure.
Has Kelly researched energy medicine a la William Berkston, PhD? I don't know what that is. Is it Bengston?
I think it's Bengston. Yeah. So I am familiar with Dr. Bengston's work. He actually is out here in New York, so he's close by. And my colleague Lisa Rankin turned me on to his incredible healing work, the Bengston method. Energy healing is absolutely a very common healing modality that radical remission survivors choose to use. It's not common in every single case, but it also depends on how broad you want to get, right? So Qigong could be considered energy work. Healing touch, obviously that's a healer working on you. Reiki, acupuncture, all of these things could be considered energy medicine. And I think that as we start broadening the definition of what does it mean to work with an energy healer or work with energy medicine, or even work yourself, right? Some people would say yoga and meditation are forms of energy medicine because you are moving energy through your body. So really broaden the definition, I suppose you could say that all radical remission survivors use some sort of energy manipulation practice. I'm not a Bengston's methods, but they're very, very interesting and worth looking into. Dr. Lisa Rankin writes about him and his work in her latest book, Sacred Medicine. But I'm not going to describe it. He has this thing called cycling, where he's cycling through positive images for himself. So he's basically like working on he did a lot of studies with mice and rats in the lab. And he would just be like, have his like hand above a rat, like just on top of the cage. And then he just sort of forgets about the rat and he just cycles through really happy memories and things for him. And then that rat would get better. So again, that is the very boiled down version of the Bankston method, but this idea of cycling through these positive images or memories and what that does to your system and also what it does to whoever you're connecting to is fascinating. And I really think that Dr. Bankston's results are going to end up having explanations in quantum physics. I think that's where we're going to finally be able to explain what is going on there with Dr. Bankston, because it's crazy cool. Science doesn't have a current explanation for it. I think once we get into physics, that's where the bridge is going to be made. All right, Jan, one more question before we get to the last three factors.
Here's just one comment I want to say, because I think many people are feeling the same way. Thank you for presenting keto and plant-based. I have judgy people saying I should do one or the other, but find that my body being strict with neither works great. As long as I eat lots of vegetables, the rest is okay with me. So I applaud that you did both. And then here's a question, whether eating organic vegetables and fruits, or is it just bringing more fruits? Does it matter if they're organic or not?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, it does matter. And I don't like to have to say that, because we all know that organic produce costs more. The good news is that the more that consumers buy organic produce, the more that the grocers, the big grocery companies will see, oh, there's a demand for this. And then the prices will go down. And we saw that, right? When Stonyfield organic yogurt finally made its way into Walmart grocery stores. Like, that was a huge boon for all different socioeconomic statuses to have organic foods available at a place as affordable as Walmart grocery stores. So it does matter. You don't want to introduce more chemicals when you're trying to clean up your body and your energy system. And Radical Remission survivors, to the best of their financial ability, do try to eat organically. And the ones who, by the way, there are Radical Remission survivors across the whole economic spectrum. So they are not all wealthy, higher economic status people. There are plenty of people. So if you watch episode 10 of my docuseries, which is social support, this is baby Ryder Sternagel. This was a young family just starting out whose baby was diagnosed with stage 4 infant neuroblastoma, right? A terrible diagnosis. And they wanted to bring in all of these alternative and integrative methods that weren't covered by insurance. So they needed the financial support of friends and family. And in the end, they got support from strangers and across the internet, including me. I found out about baby Ryder from a Facebook share, and I was so drawn in by it that I donated money for his green juice. And then the other woman in episode 10 is Catherine Alexander. And she was a woman who didn't, this was before Obamacare. And so she didn't have health insurance at the age of 62. She was waiting for Medicare, and she was diagnosed with stage 3 liver cancer. And she needed financial support from friends and family to get through to eat her organic vegetables and to get her alternative treatments. So I will say, yes, these things cost money, and organic foods do cost more than non-organic foods. But maybe if you bring in that social support factor and you do your GoFundMe or you do your fundraiser and you ask for help, you'll be surprised by how people want to help you eat those organic vegetables. So, all right, let me take you through the last three so that we don't leave you hanging. Let me just get back here to my presentation. Okay, so the last three are emotional and mental. The first one is releasing suppressed emotions. This is anything that you're holding in from the present, the past, maybe the way past, maybe your childhood. And it might also be something you're holding on to about the future. So if you're anxious about the future, if you're anxious about dying, you're holding on to that fear. And what Radical Remission survivors do is they feel fear. They are not depressed. Many of them are feeling fear of dying every single day. So the goal is not to avoid these quote unquote negative emotions. I personally believe that no emotion is negative. They're all just emotions. They're colors of the rainbow. What Radical Remission survivors do is they try to allow emotions to flow through them. So it's a lot like standing under a waterfall, like just let the water hit you and run down, right? So if you feel scared one day, let yourself feel scared, let yourself feel it. And eventually it'll pass. Another good analogy is like the weather, right? If you stand outside all day, some days it'll be sunny, Some days a cloud will pass over your head, but you just have to sit there and feel it, and feel the weather, feel the emotions. Really incredible research here, not just on stress reduction, which is, of course, that was the beginning of this field of research. Like right here in this slide, I say just a 6-week course, and that's meeting once a week for 6 weeks. A 6-week course in stress management led to significantly increased numbers of natural killer cell activity for cancer patients. And that was compared to a control group. So this is really good research showing that, a 2-hour class once a week for 6 weeks on how to release that feeling of stress and fear and get to a place where you're more calm will actually help your body fight cancer with more natural killer cells. So really, really incredible research in this field. There's one last thing I'll say is that the trauma research going on right now is so exciting. And this idea of how trauma, whether it's big traumas like living through 9/11 or, having some big, really big trauma happen in your life, or it could be little traumas, right? Like maybe you grew up in a childhood home, you just had a very anxious mother. And so there was just this feeling of anxiety all the time. Working through whatever your childhood was or whatever your past traumas were through trauma therapy, and there's lots of different trauma therapies that remission survivors use, has really been shown to very much shift the inner biochemistry in a very positive way. So I would say if there's any sort of chronic trauma from your childhood or from your past, or even big traumas, grief, rape, abuse, anything like that, it really will help your body heal to work with a trauma-informed therapist, because it will unlock things that are holding you in fight or flight and holding you on guard. And it will allow things to start moving in the rest and repair mode that we're all trying to get to, right? All right, increasing positive emotions. This probably needs no explanation. I will just say only 5 minutes a day is what's necessary. You don't have to be happy all the time. For Radical Remission survivors, many of them spent months in fear and depression, but they made sure for 5 minutes a day, they found a way to distract themselves from that and to feel some laughter or some joy or some peace. And then spiritual practice, listed here last, but certainly not least. Notice I said spiritual practice, not spiritual belief, because according to Radical Remission survivors, at least according to my research, it doesn't matter what you believe. It just matters that you do some sort of daily practice that slows the breath, slows the heart rate, and turns on a whole host of positive biochemical changes in your brain, right? So, this study, which was one of my favorite studies, people who had never meditated before were taught how to meditate, and they were told to do it for just 30 minutes a day for 8 weeks. In 8 weeks, they turned off their oncogenes, their cancer genes. So really important physical changes happening to the body when we do a daily spiritual practice. And that could be prayer, that could be meditation, that could be running. Anything that's letting the thoughts in your mind calm down, quiet down, where you get to a place of mental quiet. And I wanted to show you one last little video of releasing suppressed emotions. This gentleman here that you just saw is Yokanan, and he is in the episode of the docuseries that talks about releasing suppressed emotions. So here's a little preview of that.
What inspired me was just that I've heard cancer is curable. Cancer is a disease that the body gives us the opportunity to look deeper into what root causes could be. Bitterness and this resentment, this holding on, this vice. And I've always felt that there has to be some type of connection.
I knew I wasn't going to die. I knew I found the reason why I had cancer and what I needed to do to get rid of it. I created the cancer because I was unhappy with life. I was unhappy with God. I created the cancer and I could recreate it. Checking my thoughts, changing my thoughts, and decided I'm too young to die.
We're not here to cure our diseases. Our diseases are here to cure us. My name is John Yokanan Russell, and I'm a survivor of multiple myeloma cancer.
Non-small cell lung cancer.
Lymphatic cancer.
Breast cancer of stage 4 ovarian cancer.
All right, so So that for those of you who have read Radical Remission, the second gentleman in that preview is Joe from the chapter on releasing suppressed emotions. So that's the Joe from Radical Remission. And then Yochanan is in neither of my books. I found him through my website, and wonderful, incredible man who survived multiple myeloma cancer. He was given months to live, and it's been 5.5 years since then. So, all right, it's 2:00, and I know I've talked so much, but I'm glad we got some questions in. Jan, do you want to just give me 2 more?
Yes, and because we are running out of time, I'm going to give you both questions at once, so you can decide how much time you want to spend on each one.
Perfect.
The first one is, how do we know what is helping and what is not, especially if we are doing both conventional and non-conventional treatments? And then the other question is, I am 6 years out from metastatic breast cancer, dealing with huge PTSD issues. Anything to help with that?
Okay. All right, let me take the first question first. How do you know what's working if you're doing both? From a scientific perspective, you can't know. It's impossible to know. That's why we do clinical trials with one factor at a time. And that's frustrating because you might not have time to test one thing at a time. What I will say is that what Radical Remission survivors end up doing is they keep going with these 10 lifestyle change factors. And then they use things like their spiritual practice or their intuition or the work that they're doing with their therapist to get to a point where they decide this. They decide, when am I going to feel comfortable taking one of these things away and seeing how I do with just one, right? And so they might take away some of the alternative stuff, or they might take away some of the conventional medicine. They might say, for example, I'm going to do 6 more months of all of this, right? All 10 factors plus the chemo. But after that, I think I'd like to have a 3-month break. And during that 3-month break, I'm going to continue with the 10 factors, but I'm going to give my body a break from the chemo just to sort of see what happens. And that's a personal decision that they make with their whole healing team, including their oncologists, right? So a good example of this is Nancy, who is quoted briefly in Radical Remission, and then she's featured prominently in episode 9 of the docuseries, Her Intuition. Her intuition really spoke to her and said, let's not do the surgery yet. And so she ended up working with her doctor to come up with a deadline. And her doctor said, okay, but I need to know you're going to get a surgery by June if all these other things you're doing aren't working. And Nancy said, okay, deal. Like, they basically did a handshake deal. And she had in her mind, okay, I've got till June to see how these things work. And for some people that wouldn't work. That would put too much pressure on these alternative therapies. But for her, it actually made her relax, because she was like, okay, I'm not being irresponsible. I'm going to do the surgery, but I'm going to do it in June. And that means that I can prepare myself for surgery and do these things that I believe in and that I believe are important. And I can do them fully without any side effects and without any of the other, complications that come with chemo. And so that actually put her at ease to be able to focus fully on the 10 factors, and knowing that the surgery was in her back pocket. It was there, it was waiting for her. It was going to come if it needed to come. And she was able to get into a place of peace and out of stress and into rest and repair, do the 10 factors. June comes along, her tumor's shrinking. So she's like, well, let's see if these factors work for a little longer. And she ended up not needing the surgery, but she was in communication with her doctor. So I think that's what I would recommend is it's impossible to know which one is working, and only you and your healing team can figure out when to start taking some things away and giving them a bit of a pause. And then the second question, Jan, can you repeat it? Because I'm not sure what the PTSD was about. Was there a detail there?
It was 6 years after a metastatic breast cancer diagnosis. So PTSD about, I'm assuming that she might be in remission because she says 6 years after diagnosis, but PTSD about that.
PTSD, yeah. So I would just want more information about, like, is the PTSD because you were diagnosed? Is the PTSD because the treatments were were tough on you? Is the PTSD because you're worried it's going to come back, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder is what we're talking about here. And what I would say is whenever it comes to feelings, if you're feeling that you have a post-traumatic stress disorder, that is something like, that is, to me, that is like high blood pressure. Like you need to see a doctor. And I say doctor because what I mean by that is you can see a medical doctor for your PTSD, but you'll see a different kind of health practitioner. You could see an energy healer. You could see a trauma therapist. You could see a pastor or a minister, but see someone if you have feelings of PTSD, because to me, it's just as serious of a threat to your physical health as something like high blood pressure or, your blood labs being off. So if you are anyone, whether you're a cancer survivor or you're someone who's hoping to, live to 100, if you ever start feeling that I've got PTSD about something, that is a condition that needs addressing, and how you choose to address it is up to you, but it's not something to ignore. Jan, I did see one last question about where can I see the docuseries? So let me tell you the secret link. All right. All right. Well, this will be here. I'll stay in there for a minute so you can press pause later on the recording. This just talks about what we're doing these days and what our next steps are. So you can pause the recording later if you want to read that. But this is what I want to show you. You can watch episode 1 now. I just got this link last night from Hay House. So you all are the very first ones in the world to know that this is up right now. Episode 1 is not available anywhere else in the world right now, except at this link. So it's, you'll have to read it, the like hayhs.com/remission. And you can watch episode 1 now. So the series will launch for free October 3rd through 7th. Hay House is showing 2 episodes free per day, each day. But as a like sort of teaser and way to get people excited, they're making episode 1 available now. So go ahead and go watch it. Let me know what you think of Shin's story and Palmer's story. And we also have so many wonderful experts who agreed to be interviewed. So many amazing researchers from Harvard, from MD Anderson, from UCSF, from wonderful different scientific institutions around this country. Not the world, because we didn't have the budget to fly everywhere I wanted to fly, but take a look at the docuseries and let me know on, Radical Remission's Instagram or Facebook what you think. And I'm really glad that I was able to share a little bit about it with you today. And Jan, thanks for having me. I hope I got to all the important questions.
There were a couple other specific questions that how to find practitioners that I'm sorry, we don't have time to deal with all the questions. So I tried to pick the ones that would affect the most people. And thank you so much. I always feel inspired. Sometimes I feel like I need to reread your books every year just because it enhances my inspiration to do what I'm already doing. So thank you so much for taking the time and for doing this. And
you're so welcome.
Will be, somebody just wrote in the comments, Kelly, you rock, which, which is,
thank you.
Probably how many of us feel. There are lots of thank yous coming. And I'm looking forward to the docuseries. That's only in a couple of weeks away, so that's exciting.
Yeah,
and I want to thank everybody who attended today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your questions, for your presence. Again, I want to thank those of you who made donations. Of course, there are expenses associated with doing this, and I'm grateful for your help. Your donations are really the only source of income for Healing Journeys. So thank you. And we will see you at the next speaker series webinar. So you're all on our email list. We're going to send you the recording of today's episode. And we'll let you know when our next one is scheduled. So thank you all again.